happy holidays from your friends at Cornerstone, and best wishes from Mr. Keith Reilly, who has sent out this Bordeaux Box to you. And before we get started on the wines through nice tasting, I'll just point out some of the things that are in the box. So to start off, we've got the Bordeaux Guide, and there's a lot of information packed in here, but I would just point out that on page 2, we have the map of Bordeaux, which I'll be referring to a number of times. And then we have the vintage chart. So a lot of data here. Vintages, favorite wines, characteristics of each vintage, two-sided. So there's, again, plenty to chew on here. And we'll talk a little bit about vintages. And then, of course, we've got the bottles of wine, and you should have 3 bottles of wine unless someone got to the box before you. So let's talk first a little bit about Bordeaux. Let's open some wine first. I'll tell you which one we're going to start off with. We're going to start with the Chateau Citron. Okay, this is the label with the nice peacock on it. If you want to open that up, pour it into your glass now. That'll be great. These wines definitely benefit from a little bit of air, so it's perfectly okay to put them in your glass straight away. And I'm going to refer to, I have a bigger map here. I'm going to refer to the map just to tell you a little bit about where we are in France. So we are in southwestern France, right along the Atlantic Ocean. And so it's not quite the Mediterranean, right? It's a little bit cooler here. And we have a number of bodies of water. We have this big estuary called the Gironde. It's the largest estuary in all of Europe. Stay with me, you'll understand why I'm talking about this stuff. And then we've got a couple of major rivers. We've got the Dordogne River and the Garonne River. And this whole area is really very influenced by water. And that's why it's called Bordeaux, because Bordeaux, translated from French, is basically border of waters. Eau is the plural of waters. So we've got all these different features of water, and that is why vintages matter. It's not sunny, palm tree-ridden, California, where it's 90 degrees every day and sunny during the month of August leading into harvest time. In Bordeaux, you can get wet. There can be fog, there can be humidity, there can be rain, and although the weather is getting warmer and more consistent as things move along, but this is why vintage matters in Bordeaux, because we have this influence of all of this water, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes things go off the rails. So, first wine to get started, again, the Chateau Citron, and this is from an area called the Haut-Médoc, or the High Médoc. And the Médoc is over on the left bank of Bordeaux. So this is the left bank, and then we've got over here the right bank, and they're different because the left bank has soils that are very favorable to Cabernet Sauvignon. So usually left bank wines are Cabernet Sauvignon dominant blends, and then over on the right bank, this is where Merlot is very happy. And Merlot is not a bad word in Bordeaux. It produces some of the nicest Merlots in the world. The other thing that should be said is we've got 5 different major grape varieties in Bordeaux. Already mentioned 2, Cabernet Sauvignon on the left bank, Merlot on the right bank, and then you've got Cabernet Franc, which is actually the father of Cabernet Sauvignon. You have Petit Verdot, and you also have Malbec, which not Argentine originally. It's from the south of France and was taken over to Argentina, where it's living very happily. But those are the 5 major grape varieties of Bordeaux: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec. And we're in France, and they blend. They like to cook, and depending on the vintage, they'll put in more of one versus another. It's just whatever nature has given them that year, they'll try and make the best blend that they can. So again, first wine, Chateau Citron, and this is from the Haut-Médoc. So we are in Cabernet land on the left bank of Bordeaux. and we should go ahead and give this a swirl. And by the way, nice big glasses. And actually, this is where I might say you may want to hit pause, because this Cabernet Sauvignon is not going to be your California Cabernet. This is actually going to be a little bit different. It's going to have pretty good mouth-watering acidity, and it's going to have something called tannin, which is a product of the skins of the grape, and which makes the wine feel a little bit dry. So it's going to make you hungry. So if you want to just hit pause for a second, grab a wedge of cheese, or some meats, or whatever suits you. That can be good, because your mouth is going to start watering once you start tasting this wine. All right, so Haut Médoc, Cabernet dominant. In this particular instance, we've got pretty much a 50-50 blend between Cabernet and Merlot, so kind of we're easing into it. And let's go ahead and give this a smell and a taste. All right, right away, it's not like super ripe, sweet fruit, right? There's something, it's a little bit quieter than that. There's something maybe lightly spicy, lightly savory, maybe even a little bit smoky. And well, let's taste it. Okay, so immediately that acidity is right up front. It's a little bit sour, and you might say, I don't know about that, but think about it. If you have that with food, it's going to be very refreshing, and it's going to make you want to tuck into whatever you have in front of you for another bite. And that's really what they think about in Bordeaux. They're not thinking about making wines for cocktailing. They're thinking about making wines that are fresh, that aren't too rich. And you notice this is sort of a lighter bodied wine. I mean, it's really medium bodied in this weight, with good acidity, and the fruit is not overripe. It's kind of like wild berry fruit, right? There's a little bit of the tartness that you get when you pick those berries off of the bush, and it just makes you hungry. So here I'm getting currants. I'm getting dark berries, blackberries. And I'm getting that sense of drying on the finish, and that again is called tannin. And you might think, well, I don't know if I like that. Once you tuck into your food, it disappears. You get into your nice steak or your roast or whatever it is, roast chicken, and all the wonderful fat of that protein is going to absorb that tannin, and you're just going to taste the juiciness of the wine. So not necessarily for drinking at the bar with salted peanuts, but with a good meal, it's great. And here, again, kind of a bluer fruit profile. So let's move on to our next wine, which is from a specific place a little bit further north. This is going to be the Liliane La Douce from Saint-Estèphe. Saint-Estèphe is pretty far north from the city of Bordeaux, upriver, or actually downriver. And if this is the city of Bordeaux, and we were in this general zone here before, we're moving up, and we're getting a wider estuary. The wind is coming in a little bit more easily off the water, and we also have the Atlantic coming in closer. And so this area is a little bit cooler than the area that we were just tasting from a moment ago. Saint-Estèphe is considered one of the great bits of what is a very large wine growing region. And if you have the wine in your glass, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and taste it. A little bit darker in color. Okay, so I'm going to give you my impressions. Again, if the wine has just been opened, you may want to let it, get further opened in the glass. Give it a little bit of time, swirl it around if you can do it without spilling. That's why I wear this color sweater. And so I get something a little bit peppery. There's something a little bit licoricey, these are my words, but I'm not getting like sweet fruit. It's a fairly complex wine with all kinds of layers. Definitely getting the pepper. Okay, so once again, pretty refreshing acidity. And this one's interesting because the fruit is, it feels dark, and it's definitely drawing my tongue on the finish. But it has a little more roundness in the body of the wine, a little more sort of suave texture. And what's interesting is, even though we're on the left bank and Cabernet is the dominant grape, Saint-Estèphe is an outlier. They do have quite a bit of Merlot planted, and that Merlot sort of gives a richness. It fills in the middle of the wine and gives it this nice textural smoothness. But then the iron fist of the tannin comes in and says, you really need to start grilling to enjoy your food with this wine. Something off the grill is going to be great. Even if it's salmon off the grill with mushrooms, that'll be fine. But this is a dark wine. It needs something. It needs a little bit of fire. So, it's this yin-yang because it, again, dark fruit, but also this nice rich middle, and then it gets really dry. Okay, that's Saint-Estèphe. That's what it tastes like. Each one of these different places around Bordeaux has a different flavor aroma profile, and that's the fun of it. There's a lot of diversity, and you can figure out what you like. And the other thing that I like doing is tasting the wine before I start cooking, because when I start picking out those flavors that I'm getting, whatever flavors you're getting, aromas, you can start thinking about how you're going to prepare the food, maybe how you're going to season it, or what kind of takeout you feel like ordering. So for our third wine, we have something completely different. This is from the other side of the rivers. We're going to go over to the right bank, and if you remember, the right bank is where Merlot is in charge. Merlot's the main grape variety in the blends. This particular wine is called Clos Prix Arnaud. It's from the outstanding vintage of 2015, Goldilocks vintage. Everything went well. And this wine is 80% Merlot and 20% Cabernet Franc. So it has nothing to do with the wines that we were tasting before. It is absolutely Merlot dominant, and unlike Miles in the movie Sideways, who did not like Merlot at all, here it's a different animal because this Merlot is in its favorite place in terms of growing conditions. Over on the right bank, we've got a lot of clay and we've got a lot of limestone. Why am I talking about geology? Well, Merlot likes the water that those soils hold on to, and essentially it likes the sun too. It's as if it were sitting, out in Palm Springs, soaking up the sun, but it doesn't want to get too hot, so it wants its feet in the water. And this will actually come into play once we taste this wine and feel how the wine finishes, because you can actually taste the soil. I know that may not sound immediately super attractive, but you'll see. It's kind of cool. So again, the Clos Prix Arnaud 2015, and it's from an area just near Saint-Emilion, the famous little village of Saint-Emilion. This place is called the Côte de Castillon. Côte de Castillon. That's a name you're going to want to remember, because that area is seeing better and better wine as producers are investing in this area, and also the weather is getting a little bit warmer. The wines here are really outperforming. So let's go ahead and smell it. Yeah, that smells quite different. I'm smelling much sweeter fruit. There's almost like a Bing cherry quality to it, almost like a wild strawberry quality to it. right away, more sweetness of fruit, redder fruit, and then it gets interesting because the finish, the tannin in this wine, it's really chalky. It's almost like, you can feel it, right? It's like drying and chalky, and that comes from the soil. It's because this wine is grown on limestone, and you're getting that limestone chalkiness on the finish. And maybe more importantly, the fruit, as I said, is red, and the body is kind of round, but it's interesting because it tightens up, as they say, on the finish. It really has this mouth-watering quality of this chalkiness. Really pure red fruit flavors. And another interesting thing about this particular property is there's a trend going on in Bordeaux. More and more folks are basically farming organically. But then you've got some people like Thierry Valette with Clos Arnaud. He has actually gone beyond organics into something called biodynamics, which basically means he's growing organically, but he's also employing some practices out in the vineyard and in the winery to keep this wine just as clean as possible. It's not a natural wine because it does have some sulfur added, but sulfur is added to almost all wine with very light doses just to protect it against oxidation. Natural wine is no sulfur, and sometimes those wines don't hold that well. But this is an example of a biodynamic wine from Bordeaux, which has really beautiful purity of fruit. And more importantly, for our purposes, as we compare all of these wines, it has a very different profile, being a Merlot-based wine from the right bank. So I'm taking the last two wines, I'm going to smell them together. Oh my. Our Saint-Estèphe, the Liliane La Douce, the pepper is really coming up on this. And I'm almost getting something a little bit minty. I don't know. It's just what I'm feeling. If you go back to our second wine, that acidity is racy. It's like, wow, super mouth-watering. And our last wine, sweetness of fruit, still has the good acidity, has the tannin. I warned you, a little bit of food, if you didn't have it already, you probably are getting ready to have some very, very soon because your mouth might be feeling a little bit dry. But that's okay. Once you start tasting the wines with the food, it'll be great. Lastly, I just want to mention, in our little pamphlet here, there are some fun facts about Bordeaux. As I mentioned, there are the grape varieties. There are also bits about figuring out whether you prefer right bank or left bank wines better. There are descriptions of the major growing areas like Margaux and Saint-Julien and Pauillac and Saint-Estèphe, which we just tried. There are wine tasting tips, and there are also, very importantly, for when things get better, there's some great tips on visiting the area of Bordeaux. Not just great wine, also great food, great architecture, beautiful, and great beaches not too far away. So this is a good little piece to hold on to. Hope you enjoyed this tasting, and once again, thank you to Cornerstone for making this all possible. Happy holidays. Cheers.